Hello, in today's video we're going to continue our discussion on section 5.2, which is on solving systems of linear equations by substitution. First, I'd like to spend a moment reviewing our first part of lesson 5.2, where we discussed basic procedures for solving using substitution. I'm going to ask you to pause the video now and try working through this question here on your own before I walk you through it. Our first step in substitution, as outlined in our first video, is to isolate one of the variables. So here I see that y is alone, which means I can move on to step 2, which is replacing y with that 2x in my other equation. So 5x minus, and then I input my y inside these parentheses, so whatever is inside here represents y, and that is 2x equals 21. Now I can solve. 5x minus 2x is 3x is equal to 21. And my last step is to just divide by 3. And I have solved for x. So x is equal to 7. Now we are not asked to find just x in this case. We are asked to solve, which means I need to find both x and y. So I'm going to go ahead and take that x value that I just found, and I can either replace it in my first equation, which will help me find y, or I can replace it in the second equation and solve for y. Now I think it will be easier to use the first equation, but it doesn't matter which one. So I'm going to go ahead and input x into my equation y equals 2x, but I know that x has to be 7, so 2 times 7, and I use parentheses to input my x value. So this tells us that y is 14. So my solution is 7, 14, or the solution, 7, 14, represents the point where our two lines intersect. We, in our first section of chapter 5, discussed solving by graphing. So if I solve this equation by graphing, I might have a graph that looks like this, and another graph that maybe looks like this. And we are looking for the point where those two lines intersect, which would be at the point 7, 14. Now we're going to move on into our next part, our new part of solving systems of equations by substitution. So it is extremely important that we always use parentheses when replacing or substituting a variable. So just like I did in our first example here, when I replaced y, I made sure to use parentheses where my y goes, and then I filled in the inside of the parentheses with the value that I'm substituting. And the reason that this is so important is because there may be a negative out front like there is here, or a number that you will need to distribute. We're going to see that coming up in these next few slides. So step 1, always make sure one of your variables is isolated. So here I've got x, and x is isolated or all alone. So step 2, I substitute this value, and by this value I mean the y plus 1, into my other equation. So I'm going to take that y plus 1 and replace x in my other equation. But it is extremely important that I use parentheses. So what I'm going to do first is rewrite this equation, but instead of an x, I'm going to leave a blank with parentheses. Plus y is equal to 13. Now I can take that value for x and replace it inside my parentheses, which represent x. So 2 times x plus y, which actually means 2 times y plus 1 plus y, is equal to 13. So now we can see that I will need to distribute this 2 to both the y and the 1. So 2 times y plus 2 plus y is equal to 13. If I did not have these parentheses, then I would only multiply the 2 and the y. So it is very important to have those parentheses to know that the 2 also gets multiplied by 1. I combine like terms, so I can add 2y and y to get 3y. And then I have a plus 2 equals 13. And now I can solve. I subtract 2 from both sides, and that is my step 3. I solve. Subtract 2 from both sides. I've got 3y is equal to 11. And to undo my multiplication, I will divide by 3. And it looks like my y does not divide into an integer, so I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. Y equals 11 over 3. Now I'm actually going to stop here because I'm more interested right now in practicing our substitution. So I'm going to go ahead and move on and practice another one with you, and then I'm going to ask you to practice a few on your own. So solving the system of equations by substitution. Step 1, isolate a variable. So I do already have a y that is isolated, so I'm going to take that value of y, or the 2x plus 3, and replace it for y, and that is step 2. Remember that we must use parentheses. So here my x stays, but I am replacing my y with something. So I have 7x plus 2 times y is equal to 27. Now we know that y is negative 2x plus 3, so I'm going to put that negative 2x plus 3 in where y goes. So I still have 2 times y, but things just look a little bit different. So I have 7x, and I have a positive 2 on the outside of these parentheses, which means I must distribute. So I have a minus 4x when I multiply 2 and negative 2x, and 2 times positive 3 is a positive 6. And before we solve, we make sure to combine like terms. 7x minus 4x is 3x, plus 6 is equal to 27. And then step 3 is to solve this equation. So I subtract 6 from both sides, giving me 3x is 21. And then dividing by 3 to solve for x, I find out that x is equal to 7. So steps 1, 2, and 3 are done. Step 4 is to substitute and solve for the other variable. So now I am actually going to go through and find my whole ordered pair. So I may plug in this value of x equals 7 in for x in either equation. It doesn't matter, we will get the same y value either way. So I can plug it into the first or the second. I prefer the first where y is already alone. I think that'll give me a little bit less work. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I've got to find myself a little space. I'll go ahead and block this off, and then I will find that value here. So y equals negative 2x plus 3, but I know that x is 7, so y equals negative 2 times 7 plus 3. And where the x goes, I did put parentheses so that I can input my 7 for that x value. So y equals negative 14 plus 3, which means that y is negative 11. So my ordered pair, I have an x value of 7 and a y value of negative 11, meaning that my ordered pair solution is 7, negative 11. This is the point where the two lines intersect. I'll walk you through one more, and then I'm going to have you practice the rest on your own. So step 1, isolate one of my variables. Looking at my system of equations, I see that x is already isolated, and I know what x equals, and that is negative 4y minus 2. So step 1 is done. Now I take that value of x and I replace it for x in my other equation, making sure to use parentheses. So 3 times x plus 8y is equal to 14. My x value that I'm replacing is actually the negative 4y minus 2. I just took what I know that x equals and replaced it in that second equation. Now I distribute to get negative 12y minus 6 plus 8y is equal to 14. And I will combine like terms, so I'm going to combine my negative 12y and my positive 8y. And when I combine those two things, I get a negative 4y. So that came from combining the negative 12 and the positive 8. I still have a minus 6 is equal to 14. So now I solve. I add 6 to both sides. Negative 4y is equal to 20. And I divide by negative 4. And find that y is equal to negative 5. So step 2 and step 3 are done. I now just need to find my other variable. So I need to now go back to my original system of equations and plug in my y value to either the y value in the first equation or the y value in the second equation. It doesn't matter. I will pick the first equation. So x equals negative 4y minus 2. X equals negative 4 times y minus 2. And that y value that I'm checking is negative 5. So x equals negative 4 times negative 5 is a positive 20 minus 2. So x is 18. And my solution is the point 18, negative 5. I'd like for you to go ahead and take a few minutes to pause the video and try these 4 questions here on your own. When you are done, you may check these with the work that I will show you, or you can go ahead and move on into the next 4 that I would also like you to do. At the end of these 8, we will go ahead and conclude our lesson on 5.2 Part 2 for today. When you're ready, you can go ahead and take another moment to pause the video and check your work on these 4 questions. And our answers for the next 4 questions 5 through 8 are shown here. That concludes our video today. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.